This is my audience.
Hi, I'm Miriam.
Bruce.
Thomas.
Kathleen.
Luis.
Are you one of the 25% of Americans who has a two-car garage with no room for a car? An article on becomingminimalist.com, Josh Becker says that $1.2 trillion are spent annually by Americans on non-essential goods, items we don't need, filling our houses with clutter. But amongst all this stuff, there is a movement which beats to a different tune. It's called minimalism. Minimalism is a concept that I've really liked ever since I heard of it, and have sort of followed it, albeit without knowing that I was. And upon doing research, I've come to really like it, and I want to share with you what I have found. 3 things in particular that I want to discuss are: minimalism is a simpler way of life, it is a life opposed to materialism, and it is more than just having less stuff. And so after talking about these things, I hope that you will come to a better idea of what minimalism is. And so that brings me to my first point. What is minimalism? Well, it's simpler way of life. It's a simplifying of one's life. In an article entitled Lifestyle, Buy Less, Live More by Michelle Hancock, she says, minimalism is about owning less and living more. So we can see that there's a positive side to it and a negative side to it. On the positive side, it's about finding meaning in our lives. So often we try to look for meaning in things where it's not to be found. And what minimalism does is reduces those things so we can focus on what we find meaning in or value in our lives. A study called Minimalist Life Orientations as a dialogical tool for happiness, the researcher, Jennifer Housen, says that it's a voluntary consciousness of lifestyle by which we are choosing what we want in our lives. That's the positive side of this simpler way of life. On the negative side, it's about homing in on the things that are essential and stripping away the superfluous. Things like toys or electronics or another app on my phone, kitchen appliances, all the tools, all sorts of things can be excess stuff. If we really look at all these things, there's very little of them that actually bring meaning or value in our lives. Housen says that it's a process by which we reassess our priorities and we try to see where the excess stuff is. Maybe it's our possessions or our relationships or even our activities. Things like, I need to have more friends on Facebook. And so, where does all this stuff come from? This brings me to my second point. It comes from materialism. Minimalism is opposed to materialism. What's materialism? Okay. Basically, you could say it's consumerism, this feverish obsession with acquiring more things in an attempt to procure happiness. Housen says that from birth, we're surrounded by these kinds of messages that promote money and possessions, things that, from areas like the media. So, minimalism is not this crusade against consumerism. It sort of rose up as like a spontaneous growth out of nowhere, just as an answer or like a movement against this consumeristic life that we live around us. So minimalism is necessarily opposed to materialism. Just take an example. Look at all the self-storage units you find as you drive down the highway. There are a dime a dozen. They're everywhere. Becker says that 1 out of every 10 Americans will be paying for off-site storage somewhere. I mean, all that clutter has to go somewhere. Housen says that even though we're stripping away all of these things from our lives, it's done, but there's no feeling of deprivation. In fact, we don't feel like we have less stuff. It ends up being more stuff. So all this anti-consumerism, this reducing of physical possessions, it tends to be the result of minimalism, but it's not minimalism itself. And so that brings me to my third point. minimalism is more than just less stuff. In fact, it's a sort of maximism. It's an area where you maximize your resources. Well, like space in a room. So it's not just about reducing, say, the amount of toys, but what about your time or your money? Those are resources. Your time is probably your most essential asset, your greatest asset to your life, and how much of it is stolen by things that we aren't even interested in, things that we don't value at all. I mean, how much of your time does your phone demand from you? Or how much mental stress does a cluttered room cause you? Or what about that acquaintance you have? Do they really add value to your life? So, Catherine Roth says that it's what you should do, or a good idea to do, is to store things in drawers, clear ones if you can. She says to avoid stacking things. She calls it a practice which is decidedly unkind to items at the bottom. So, by doing something as simple as that, you see things at a glance, clearly. You know what's there, and you don't waste time looking for things that are lost, or picking an outfit in a cluttered closet. Leo Babauta, author of Minimalist.com, says that with minimalism, you spend less time with stuff and more time doing stuff. This minimalism is a process by which we free up our resources. We find more meaning, more value in things. So, like that date night you've always wanted to go on, or more time you've wanted to spend with the kids, or that friend you haven't caught up with but always wanted to for these past years. All of a sudden, when you reassess all the resources, you're not buying so much, these things become affordable or doable. So it's not just about less stuff. You find what anchors you down, the things that make you stuck. They hinder your growth forward. Once you clear all that clutter, you find meaning in the things that you do have. You realize, oh, I like this thing. It really brings value to my life. So minimalism takes an inventory of your whole life. That's what it does. It's clearing the clutter that's meaningless and filling it with valuable things. Catherine Roth says that after we remove all this excess stuff, we find that we have space to address real life issues that we have. Things like the relationships we actually want to have, or the activities we actually want to do. And so, these are just some of the things that minimalism can address. So, what about that model train set you have downstairs? All those resources, all those items you have to buy to build it, all the space it takes up downstairs. You can have that, it can be a reality. And what about all those Thomas Aquinas college notes you kept from all those years back in California, taking up space on a shelf or in some box in an attic? Yes, you can keep those things too. But maybe one or two of those fuzzy socks are not really being used, or maybe a couple ties at the end of the day are just, well, closet decoration. Minimalism says that if something brings meaning to your life, then by all means keep it. Because minimalism is just a simpler way of life. It is a life opposed to materialism, and it is more than just having less stuff. It is a total life inventory, maximizing our resources to find where the meaning is in the things that are left over. In the words of Catherine Roth, she says, minimalism is connecting with the things that bring us meaning, that spark joy, and bidding a fond but firm farewell to the rest.